Thank you for joining me on this Sew What Pro tutorial in using the repositional hoop. All right, the repositional hoop can be a lot of fun using with your embroidery 4x4 machine. It opens up huge possibilities of what you can do without being limited to 4x4 square inches. Our third repositional hoop project is a lot more intricate. All right, so it's going to be an embroidery design that's all one color stop. So we're going to have to cut it in half. Well, how hard is that to do? Let's dive right in and I'll show you how simple it really is. Perfect example once we resize it. Okay, so here's our feather, and as you see, it does fit in the 4x4 hoop, but we want this to be bigger. All right, and the cool thing is if we make it bigger, it's still not going to be over 4 inches, although tall, although the width will be bigger. So we're at 100%. We're going to take this up to 140%, and we'll hit OK. And as you see now, it does not fit in the 4x4 hoop. Okay, so let us go ahead and put this in the repositional hoop. So we want the small overlap again. And it doesn't matter if you do the other way. So just for kicks, we can go ahead and just pick this one, because you still have your positions and technically it's still sideways. This is just to help you with your personal orientation as you're working with the file. So as we see, no matter which 4x4 section we choose, it's not going to fit. It's too big, but it's one color stop. So how do we split this up? The exact same way. The exact same way we split it up before. So let's open our cutting toolbar. Which position do we want? Let's look at position 3. Look at position 1. So right down the middle seems to be a good place. So we'll click here. We'll click here. And then we'll come up here, come over here, down here, and let's cut our pattern. All right, so now you have two different color stops. There's the top part of the feather. There's the top part of the feather, sorry, and the other was the bottom part of the feather. So this pattern has been cut into two separate color stops so that you can successfully stitch this out with your 4x4 hoops by putting this in the 4x4 repositional hoop, rather, I should say. So if we save it, it's going to save as two different positions, 3 and 1. Okay, and we can double check that by coming up here, clicking open, and then you can just click on it. You don't have to actually open it. You can click, see what it looks like, and this is the original uncut file. All right, P1, position 1, P3, position 3. Now, there have been instances where you would take P1 and P3, put it in the embroidery machine, and you stitch out P1, and then you stitch out P3, and there's a bit of a space on the embroidery design when you stitch it out. It ends up looking something along these lines. Maybe not quite that drastic, but there's an obvious split in the middle of the pattern when you stitch it out. How do you fix that, or how do you avoid that? Well, first of all, it doesn't, from what I understand, always happen. Okay, it doesn't always happen, but if it does, then an easy remedy is found on the machine itself. Okay, so the cool thing is you can bump the two patterns together using your embroidery machine. All right, so let me show you what I mean. This was position 1, remember? So when you put this on the embroidery machine, this is the part that you will load first. Now notice it's not all the way up to the edge of the embroidery hoop. So you have space. So when you put this on, prior to stitching it out, you go into the menu of your embroidery machine and you nudge it to where this comes down, and you nudge it maybe 2 little teeny bumps. Okay. And when it's time to do position number 3, position number 3 is down here, and again you have some space. So in your embroidery machine, you bump that up, maybe 1, 2 little bumps, maybe 1 bump. You don't want to do too much, and it should embroider together. That's if you embroider it and it does come with a space in between. Now when it comes to doing your embroidery and you're practicing, you're learning, and you're trying a repositional pattern for the first time, you've never done one before, I always strongly suggest that you stitch out a test sample first. All right, do your test it out. Don't stitch it on the item that is actually going on, because that way, if it does embroider with a little bit of a gap there, you can see how it works to bump it up just a little bit on either side. All right, but if you stitch it out on your test and it doesn't have that space, well, you know, hey, cool, I'm great to go ahead and put this on the towel, on the blanket, or the shirt, or whatever you're putting it on. You can go ahead and use it. But if you stitch it out and it has the space and you bump it a little bit and there's still another space, you're still stitching it on your test item, because you want to test it until it actually stitches out the way you need it to stitch out on the item. Yes, that's going to take some time. That takes a lot of time, especially if it's a design with a lot of stitches. I am very aware of that. However, if you are doing a project for a customer, you don't want to ruin something that is for a customer. You really don't. And you don't want to keep wasting items. Like, for instance, if it's a shirt, say it's going on a shirt and you supplied the shirt. All right. Well, if you stitch it out on the shirt that you purchased, well, you've ruined the shirt that you purchased, because now there's a space. It might have a space, it might not. That's sometimes it does stitch with that space. I'm not sure why, and that could be something that's been fixed, and I'm not aware of that. But either way, you always really should stitch out a test sample of your designs when you do them first, so that you can see what it's going to look like, then stitch it out on the customer's item. Because if you don't, like, if you stitch it on the first thing and it doesn't stitch out correctly, and you're like, oh, it didn't stitch, well, let me adjust it, then you try on another item which is the exact same shirt, well, now you've ruined 2 shirts when you could have just stitched it out maybe on that same first shirt in a different section, and then you would know, okay, well, it still stitches out really good on the shirt, but it still has a little bit of a gap, so I'm gonna adjust it again. You see what I'm saying? So you want to always test before you actually go ahead and do the design on the item. So again, I hope that that was helpful to you all. The repositional hoop is a lot of fun. It opens up the possibilities with the 4x4 embroidery machine, whereas before people say, oh, you're restricted, you can't go larger than 4x4, and that is so not the case. You actually can. If you can make sure that your design is not larger than 4 inches in one way, then you can go larger than 4 inches the opposite direction, up to just over 6.5 inches, you know. So that gives you a lot more space to do those projects that you want to do. Now, unfortunately, this particular repositional hoop trick, it doesn't really work with in the hoop projects. There may be 1 or 2 you might could use this with and get away with it, but for the most part, all the way across the board, that is not going to work. The repositional hoop is not really going to work for an in the hoop project. And you kind of can, but it's a whole lot you got to go through and break up the patterns into so many different patterns. It really doesn't make it worth it in a lot of instances. So we'll have to cover that project in a completely different episode to see how you might could make that work. but it is a pain, I'm telling you now. So we definitely are going to have to save that for a later project. So until the next time I see you guys, then I hope you enjoy your repositional hoops. Give it a shot, work with them, be patient. Look for those patterns that are less than 4 inches by up to 6.5 inches, and you will have a good time with your repositional hoop. And I know that you will have happy embroidering. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you all with our next show.